We're live, a casual take with your boy Steven Pepper, here to give a take off my chest. So, okay, just before I fire up some of the March Madness games for today, I want to talk about this because I do have some family who are Kentucky basketball fans and they watch my show. Shout out to them. And I thought I'd treat them with a take I have on Kentucky basketball because I do watch them. I don't really watch much college basketball. I don't talk much on the show, but I do watch Kentucky. And there's a lot of rumors surrounding John Calipari and his future. There was a report yesterday, a resolution on the short-term future of Kentucky men's basketball head coach John Calipari could come relatively quickly, according to Matt Jones of Kentucky Sports Radio. So a lot of rumors, a lot of talk in Kentucky media about head coach Kentucky John Calipari's future at the program. Of course, this comes after the embarrassing loss, another one this decade, to Oakland. Kentucky, a blue blood program with 5 stars across the board, future all-NBA, all-star level players losing to a school where no one can point to where it's at in the map. Schools that have future G Leaguers and car salesmen. And, they haven't made the Sweet 16. The blue blood with all the history, with all the NBA talent since 2019. Not at all this decade. I think they're 1-4 in their last 5 March Madness games. But if you're coming here for my answer on whether Kentucky should fire Coach Calipari, I'm not gonna lie, I don't have an answer for you. I'm indifferent. I see both arguments on the sides of the coin. Because on one hand, you can't fire Calipari because he is, to his credit, the best recruiter of my lifetime. I think if you were to do a first team all Calipari in the NBA, they would easily win the finals. He has so many 5-star athletes coming to Kentucky, bringing fans in the stands, producing money, and it's good for the program because the more 5-star to NBA players you produce, the more kids would want to come to your school in the future because they want to be in the NBA. But on the other hand, who wants to keep getting embarrassed like this again? I mean, like I said, I have family who are Kentucky fans, so I've been watching Kentucky basketball since I was a kid very closely. And there was a time where not only was Kentucky, and this seems like this is Calipari's biggest goal, was an NBA factory, but they were also a consistent Elite Eight lock. One of the best teams in the nation. But now they're not. But it's not like the talent has gone away. They still have, they have 2 lottery future top 10 players on the team right now about to go to the draft. So it's not like the talent has changed. So why aren't they a consistent Elite Eight lock anymore? So you got to blame Calipari. And I couldn't help but make a comparison for Calipari after the loss to Oakland. And it seemed like a lot of people on Twitter also had the same comparison, that Calipari is just straight up the Doc Rivers of college basketball. I'm not saying that these 2 coaches are bad. But what it's clear is they are 2 generational underachievers who are living off a first-term Obama administration ring. And this is due to the fact that they just aren't that good of in-game coaches. If you were to line up their careers, they are very similar. Before Boston and before Kentucky, these were 2 coaches who were successful and kind of making a name for themselves. Calipari took Memphis to a championship game. Doc Rivers was winning Coach of the Years in Orlando. And they were kind of asked to save these 2 struggling blue blood programs at the time, Boston and Kentucky. And then when they got to that team, within the first 3 to 4 years, they won a championship. And their teams were led by these dominant defensive anchor big men, Anthony Davis for Kentucky and Kevin Garnett for Boston. And what's also a coincidence is the fact that they went back to the big game 2 years later. They did lose. But at the time, if you were to ask yourself, will Doc Rivers in Boston and will Kentucky with Calipari get back to a championship game? You'd be like, of course. If you were to look at the rest of the rosters that Calipari, after the loss, after those losses, if you were to look at the rosters that Calipari and Doc Rivers had, you would be like, yeah, they probably would have went back to 1 or 2 more Final Fours, NBA Finals. They have gotten further away ever since their last championship losses. And that's because they aren't, and that's despite having stacked rosters. And that's because they aren't good in-game coaches. Doc Rivers is the most 3-1, 3-2 blown leads by a coach in NBA history. And Calipari's Kentucky, in the last 2 to 3 years, has lost to a 14th and a 15th seed. That is embarrassing. And that's because when it comes to the big stage, can you make that right situational adjustment? They aren't good. That's not really what they're at. I consider myself a big NBA historian. And when I looked up, I had to fact check myself on this one. Doc Rivers hasn't been to a conference final since 2012. Kentucky hasn't been to a Sweet 16 since 2019. Kentucky hasn't been to a Final Four since 2015. 2012. Doc Rivers, Calipari, 2015, 2012. The highlight of my day back then was going to school, coming home, and playing with Legos or watching a show on Cartoon Network. That long ago, 10 plus years ago. Just blowing series leads. Doc Rivers it's plagued his whole career. Like, he can't make an adjustment against Denver, blowing a 3-1 lead. Can't make an adjustment against Boston, blowing a 3-2 lead. And then here comes Calipari. We all saw it against Oakland. A team led by one guy, scored all the points. One guy who, post-game press conference, this is what frustrated him most, openly admitted that he won't go to the NBA because he knows he's not good enough. That guy beat him. He kept coming off the same screens, the same actions. In Kentucky, who doesn't have that great of a defensive talent, Calipari had his team unprepared. They looked like they watched zero film against this team. Like, they had no answer for any of the actions off ball for that shooter. They didn't know how to hedge. They didn't know how to communicate. They didn't know how to switch. They didn't know how to blitz any of those screens. And he shot 23s, made 10 of them on their heads, scored 30 points. Again, a dude who admitted that he won't go to the NBA because he knows he's not good enough. Now, again, if you want to have my answer on whether they should fire Calipari, it's going to be tough because it's going to cost them about $35 million to buy him out. And I see both sides of the coin. But he is not a good in-game coach. And Jay Wright said it after the game, that the days of just out-talenting people. Doc Rivers, why isn't won the finals? And forever, because, when he won the finals, he just had such a good team, they were just going to win the finals. Anyways, same with Calipari in 2012. 08 Celtics, 2010 Celtics, 2015 Kentucky. They were just more talented than everyone else. And that's why they won. But now, those guys a decade later, they still have the talent, but as Jay Wright said, the game evolved. Gone are the days of these freshmen. Gone are the days of this. And LeBron even said it on his podcast with J.J. Redick. He wasn't talking about college, but he was talking about the NBA. The final four teams in the NBA usually are the four smartest coaches in the league. Says a lot about why Doc Rivers hasn't gone back to the Final Four since 2012. Again, I don't have an answer whether they should fire Calipari, but I wouldn't be surprised in the coming weeks if he has just 1 year left. This is like a prove-it year next year, or if he is fired, because he is the Doc Rivers of college basketball. He's a great recruiter, great guy. Players love playing for them. Management loves paying their bills. But when it's time to fourth quarter, second half, game 7, Sweet 16, can you make that right adjustment when the game gets tight? Can you call the right timeout? Put in the right personnel? They're just not quite good at it. But I appreciate everyone for tuning in to this episode of 8 Casual Takes. Follow up to my social media to stay updated on all things related to the show. Some Casual Takes is the handle. Until next time, see ya.